And the next topic we're going to turn to is discerning and articulating a youth ministry's vision and mission. When I went off to my first full-time youth ministry, I was the third youth minister in 3 years. Anybody think that's particularly unusual? We have a problem with transients in youth ministry, right? I have a bad old joke about this. How many youth ministers does it take to change a light bulb? Nobody knows. No youth minister's been anywhere long enough for a light bulb to blow out. But when we have this kind of transience, and I hope you do not where you were, and I was unimaginative enough to stay in New Canaan for 19 years. When we have this kind of transience, you come into a community with no institutional memory. What's the vision and mission of this youth group? Nobody knows. I'm not even sure they had one. I'm not even sure the church had a mission statement. What's their schedule? Nobody knows. How do they open the year? How do they close the year? What do they do at Christmas? What's their worship style? Nobody knows. And when there is no vision and mission, you can't have continuity, you can't have direction, you can't have energy. Now, here I am, a brand new youth minister, and I had the usual associate minister's portfolio. I was doing the youth group, I was supervising Christian education, I was preaching once a month, I had pastoral care, and I taught Bible study. So this is the way I put together, I know you would never do this, but this is the way I was doing youth group scheduling. Finish the Wednesday night Bible study class around 9 o'clock, go home exhausted, and try to figure out what in the world am I going to do on Sunday with the youth group. Try to figure it out in time to get a notice in the bulletin that had to be in by Friday at noon. After church on Sunday, race down to get the supplies I needed for my youth group and roll in and do something and then rinse and repeat the next Wednesday. Make it up as I go along. Can that lead to excellence in youth ministry? No. No business would put up with that. Nobody who had dollars and cents on the line would do it that way. Why are dollars and cents more important than souls? Right? Why aren't we as intentional and determined and professional about the eternal souls of our children as we are about widgets and dollars? Right? That doesn't make any sense. And if we are wondering about the business world's, the professions world's commitment to professionalism and mission and vision and think, oh, that's just a secular thing. Oh, no, we have a Bible passage on this, don't we? We've got a Bible passage. Anybody want to quote me Proverbs? Without a vision, God's people perish. Right? Without a vision, God's people perish. So we know this is something that we need to pay attention to, and we've got to do some that better than the, oh my gosh, what are we going to do this Sunday youth ministry? Mark DeVries, who runs an excellent organization and has spoken here with us, his organization is Sustainable Youth Ministry. He talks about how we have had a whole generation of the Hail Mary strategy of youth ministry. If only we could get a good leader. If only they could find a great curriculum. If only they could renovate a room in the building for youth meetings. This fails to understand that the problem with our youth ministry is systemic. And the solution has to be systemic. It has to be intentional. We have to care about why we do this and lift up a mission and a vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Proverbs 29:18. So what we're going to turn to now is assuming that we care enough about these kids to be intentional and professional and committed and lift up a galvanizing mission. How do you do it? All right? We're going to start with why we need a mission and vision and what it can do for us and how it can strengthen our ministries with young people. And then we're going to turn the second part to how do you do it? Why and then how. Now, it's a little lamentable, but all these great spiritual concepts, discernment, vocation, this goes back to Aquinas, this goes back to Augustine. The business community knows more about this. You can go to business schools and learn more about mission and vision casting than you can at a divinity school. Anybody at Yale Divinity School ever take a course on how to construct a mission and vision statement for their church? You get that at the business school. You get that at the business school. So, some of the landmark work has been done by two professors at Stanford University Graduate School of Business, Jim Collins and Jerry Porras. And in 1994, they wanted to know, not just why are some companies excellent, why are some companies excellent in the midst of change? Change is the challenge. So who can be excellent even though they navigate change? Is this important for our churches? We got some change going on, right? So this business study, what does it take to be excellent when you're dealing with change, resulted in their work built to last successful habits of visionary companies. And this is what he said: contrary to popular wisdom, the proper first response to a changing world is not to ask, how should we change, but rather to ask, what do we stand for and why do we exist? This should never change. And then feel free to change everything else. Put another way, visionary companies distinguish their timeless core values and enduring purpose, which should never change, from their operating practices and business strategies, which should be changing constantly in response to a changing world. And the first question is not, how should we change our ministry? The first question is vocational. It's the why question. Why did I go into youth ministry? Why do we come to work each morning? Why do we want our kids to come into this ministry? Why do we even have a youth ministry? If you don't have your heart on fire for the answer to those questions, you're not going to know what to do on Sunday night. You got to work out the why you do it, all right? And once you get the why, that will govern everything else that you do in youth ministry. So Collins and Porras went on to write a seminal 1996 Harvard Business School article, Building Your Company's Vision. This is on your flash drives. All the things I'm referring to are on your flash drives, all right? And then they published Aligning Action and Values, and that's on your flash drives. And this is how they tried to clarify the confusion about vision. Vision is one of the least understood and most overused terms in the language. Vision is simply a combination of three basic elements: an organization's fundamental reason for existence beyond just making money, often called its mission or purpose. We're going to call it purpose tonight. The first thing of vision is, what's your purpose? All right? It's timeless, unchanging core values. We're going to call that values, purpose and values. And it's huge, audacious, but ultimately achievable aspirations for its own future. You got to dream big. You got to have a big aspiration and goal. He calls them BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. You got to have a BHAG. Right? You got to have a purpose. You got to have values. You got to have aspirations. All right. The most important thing being core values. And then they went to something when they wrote a book that if you got any business folks in your congregation, they almost certainly read this book. It was called Good to Great. What they were studying was, there are a bunch of good companies and there are a bunch of great companies. What companies go from good to great, and what was about them that helped them go from good to great? And he had a line in there which he quoted the Greek poet Archilochus, called the hedgehog concept. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. The fox wily, but he doesn't catch the hedgehog because the hedgehog knows one thing and he knows it big. And that works for him, right? And when I read that line, every time I read these business guys, I go, man, we were there 2,000 years before them, right? We had all these ideas 2,000 years ago. You ever hear the line that the scientists and the astrophysicists have labored up the mountain for 2,000 years, struggling every inch of the way to conquer reason and knowledge and science, and when they got to the absolute top of the mountain, they found the theologians were there ahead of them, right? Well, that's the way it is with this vision, purpose, vocation stuff. These business schools are all over, but when they get to something like the hedgehog concept, I think I've heard of a hedgehog. Who's the biggest hedgehog of all time? Jesus. That guy had one thing, right? He had a clear purpose in his life. He came so that everyone who believes in him might not perish but have eternal life. He was on his purpose, right? He came that they may have life and have it abundantly. He had his purpose. And he had a core value. He had a core value that 2.5 billion people on the planet 2,000 years later can still say what his core value was. Anybody know what his core value is? You should love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, thy mind, and I shall love thy neighbor as thyself. We're still saying it. That's a core value. That's got some enduring core value properties, right? And he had some serious high aspiration. He had a BHAG, right? Big, hairy, audacious goal. He said to his disciples, go therefore and make disciples of how many nations? All, that's some BHAG, right? All nations, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. So if we want to serve our kids well, we need to pay attention to our purpose, to our values, to our high aspirations. And if we do that, they will drive us in the direction of mission and vision statements that will energize and focus our ministry. So here's what Here's why we should discern and articulate a mission statement. It will provide a solid foundation for setting goals and objectives. So you can sit in a goals and objectives room every year and have come up with different ones. And they won't add up to anything. But once you've got your basic purpose, values, and aspirations, you can drive at goals and objectives that are in line with what you think God intended you to do with your young people. It provides priorities for making decisions about where to invest time, energy, and resources. You sat in church committee meetings, right? You know, when I was in the divinity school, I had to write a paper, why I feel called to the ministry and why I don't. Why I don't. Church committee meetings, right? I mean, there's a bunch of, everybody's got some idea what you should do. If you're a youth minister, you got 15 parents got an idea for you to do. How are you going to adjudicate what you do and what you don't do? You just got to say, here's our goal. Here are our values. Here's our purpose. Here's our aspiration. That suggestion fits or it doesn't. It gives you a way to make decisions, filtering which programs to launch and which programs not to launch. How to attract and motivate colleagues who share the articulated passion. You know, you're just out there recruiting somebody who seems interested and qualified until you have a clear mission statement. Then you can be recruiting somebody whose heart is on fire for the same thing your church is called by God to do, and then you can get somebody who lines up with the mission. Articulate the values and values cultivated by the ministry so parents and youth can understand its importance to faith and flourishing. You know, the culture has a word for our parents about what's important to their kids' lives. It'll be different in different neighborhoods, but I can tell you where I came from, it was college admissions. That was the idol at which every parent worshiped, the altar they all worshiped at. So with the kids, who thinks the parents in your church feel their kids are overextended and too busy? All right? So why are they going to come to youth group? They're too busy. Because you're going to play some games and it's going to be fun? They can do that somewhere else. Because you can teach them scripture, do they think that's important to their lives? Because you can serve it, do they think that's important to their lives? You can't win this battle with all the things competing for our young people's attention unless you have a worthy purpose, value, and goal. And the parents can go, oh, I want that for my child. The young person can say, I want some of that for my life. Then they have a reason to choose to participate, but only when you can lift up those high purposes, values, and goals. If you have a mission statement, you can lift an inspiring vision for your youth that calls them to a heroic adventure. Come to youth group because good kids come to youth group. Yeah, the good kids will come. But the kids who you really want are the ones who go, something's going on there. I'm part of something important. I'm part of something visionary. We're going to go change the world together. Right? That's when you have a mission statement that motivates. Help lay leaders understand the importance and the intrinsic value of youth ministry and the importance of allocating funds, staff, and space. You know, I've been trying to place Yale Divinity School students at churches. And we always have churches that want students. That's great. Then they get there. There's no budget. $100,000 for the music budget, $500 for youth. How is that so? Oh, look, I love music. Music's good. What about our kids? But if you don't have a mission and a vision of why you have to have a youth ministry, this is why we're doing it, you're never going to talk to trustees into voting dollars for your youth ministry, all right? You inspire your team with the courage to stay the course when the headwinds are strong. Anybody in youth ministry where there have been no reversals, where it's not hard, where it's not heartbreaking? Youth ministry is always heartbreaking. There are always headwinds. There are always things that are making our kids suffer, that make our hearts break. To stay in the game, you got to go, here's the prize and we're going for it, and it's worth hanging in there even though it's been a bad week, month, year, right? Provide a consistent foundation for creating enduring traditions, rituals, and culture. You got to build the culture. Culture doesn't happen because you put a sign on the wall. It's day over day, year over year, decade over decade, but it has to be aligned around some clear direction for culture to build. And it lays a foundation to sustain the ministry through transitions, right? Remember when I showed up, third youth minister in 3 years? I had no idea what the mission is, but if you have a clear mission and vision, you have a better chance to transition and be consistent in what you're doing as a youth group, all right? Any questions about why we need, that's the easy part, right? Why we need mission and vision statements? All right, let's turn to how. When you drill down on the how to develop a mission statement, you immediately find out, oh, I don't care what they call this is spiritual discernment. We, in the church, we call this spiritual discernment. That's what this business is all about. So you can have a quotation from a business professor, but tell me this guy isn't just working from the Bible, right? Or working from a church devotional. You do not create or set core ideology. You discover core ideology. You do not deduce it by looking at the external environment. You understand it by looking inside. Ideology has to be authentic. You cannot fake it. Discovering core ideology is not an intellectual exercise. Don't ask, what core values should we hold? That's not in your heart. That's not God talking to you, what we should do. Don't ask what core values we should hold. What core values do we truly and passionately hold? You should not confuse values that you think the organization ought to have but does not have with authentic core values. To do so would create cynicism throughout the organization, right? You got to be true to what God has placed on your congregation's heart. You got to ask for that still small voice so that you can do the work as a group to hear God's voice speaking to you and understand what it is that God's calling you to do. This is a problem and a challenge of collective spiritual discernment, which means you can't just come in from outside and say, okay, I got our mission statement. You do not have the mission statement if you just show up. You just wrote something down because they wanted it for your job description, or they wanted it for the trustee meeting, or they needed it for your personnel evaluation. That's not discernment. Discernment is gathering together with the people and prayerfully asking after God's movement in your group, and maybe including your kids in the discernment. Which means you can't just go to your office at the end of the day and write this out. You can't even pick an exemplary mission statement from a book. By the way, we got a whole bunch of nice mission statements in your flash drive, but that's to create bases for thinking and praying, not to go, oh, I think I'll take number 2, right? Now, there are several fine resources about how to do this, and I've put them in your flash drives or references to them, so I don't want to go through too much of them now. But I do want to give you a couple of resources that you can go find either on the flash drive or elsewhere. Jim Collins' Vision Framework, it's on the flash drive. Mark DeVries' Sustainable Youth Ministries, awesome, great guidance for pragmatically, how should we run a visioning process for our church? Doug Field's Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry, you'll recognize it comes out of Saddleback, Rick Warren, et cetera, right? Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry, also a good guide to how to do discernment. Now, here's what I want to do in a small group breakout. I want to ask you to do a little practice discernment at your table, all right? Just to limber up a little bit. So what I want you to ask is, what does your youth ministry stand for and why does it exist? Why did you go into youth ministry? Why do you go into work each morning? Why do you want kids to come into your youth ministry? Why do you even have a youth ministry? You got to answer these questions and not just be running good programs, loving kids, showing up. Why? All right, why? Now, there are a million answers. There's not a right answer to this. And it's not, again, the answer that you think is the right answer. It's the answer God placed on your heart. So I want to give us a couple of minutes just to share. If anybody has something that you want to report out from your table, we're going to do this for like 5 minutes. Any answers to this question? What does your youth ministry stand for? Why does it exist? Why did you go into youth ministry? Anybody want to share what's on their heart about why they're in youth ministry? We're going to use the mic so that we can pick this up at home, all right? So,
my name is Jeremy. I'm the youth director at the John Wesley United Methodist Church in Falmouth, Massachusetts. One of the things that we talked about here, a couple of us has small programs and programs that exist because the middle schoolers, are graduating out of Sunday school. And for us, the challenge is that the mission of the program is to exist so that there's something to engage the kids. And that's not a sufficient enough mission statement, because just by existing, we then fulfill the mission. So that it's not that big of a hairy, or I guess not that hairy of a goal. And so that's just something that we talked about, that, it's not enough just to be there, but, the value of actually defining better why you exist and what you need to do.
Thank you.
Hey y'all, my name is Gary Morello. I'm from New York, like 20 minutes outside of the city. And I think this is so awesome to be here, first of all. I look so much like the youth that they kind of warm up to me. They love the haircut and the boots and anyway. But we exist because of Matthew 28, right? That we're called to go out and make disciples, and to have kids at a young age and to articulate the power in the gospel. Sometimes I think Pastor Skip said it well. We think that there's some huge project we need to do or some unbelievable trip we need to take, but if you can talk about Justin Bieber and Jesus Christ in the same sentence, things do start to move. And we were talking about certain scriptures like not conforming to the world and Micah 6:8, another powerful scripture that when you set the tone and context for youth to just be, they don't have to be the star athlete, they don't have to be the musician, they don't have to be the smart A student, but they could come amongst other youth and just be and allow them to grow inside of the Christian message. The Spirit moves. We don't have to create this super big, huge platform for them to go out and be awesome young Christians. We just need to let them come in and be themselves. So we exist really because they exist. So.
Hi, I'm Roxana Walker-Canton, and I'm from Emmanuel Baptist here in New Haven. And we were just talking about our youth ministry at Emmanuel. And at Emmanuel, we have a lot of different things going on. But as we talked here, we realized, well, we really didn't have a mission that connected all of those things right now. But then my mother said, well, we used to have one. So I think it's one of those transitional things where maybe back in the day they did and we do have a mission statement, but I don't know that those who are working with the youth today really know that mission statement, which means that we need to make a new one. And so we have different things going on for different age groups, but it doesn't seem to gel into a ministry. So even when we talk about youth ministry, I don't know that we could really call it a youth ministry, but more like we have programs, we have activities.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
My name is Mary Davis. I'm from Trinity Church, Boston. So our youth program, I'm just finishing my first year as the youth minister here, and we actually have spent the last year doing pretty much this, like discerning what our youth mission statement, or like what the mission of our youth group is. And we found something that was sort of the opposite of what I was hoping for. But we are a church that is an Episcopal church really centered around liturgy. And we actually found that where the sort of mission and energy of our teenagers is in liturgical leadership and in leading worship services. And so we're getting rid of youth group, which is kind of scary. But we're saying, okay, yeah, the worship service, like that is where Christian formation is happening. So we'll see how that goes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Rush, and I'm from the Sanctuary of Faith and Glory Church in Windsor, Connecticut. And I've always been a leader among the youth, I do it in my daily work. So it's just easy to roll it over right into the church work. But being one of the major youth leaders, I'm really new at it. And I think our youth department, our youth ministry is really still new. But we exist because a church without youth is a dying church. But we're there to help raise up the nation that's soon going to take over the church, and not tomorrow, but today. So that's why we exist.
Thank you. Thank you.